What's up guys, thanks for stopping by, I hope you're doing good. In today's video I'm going to be explaining Valheim new character speedruns. There's a ton of stuff to get to in this video, but I'm going to try and keep it short and sweet. And just as a disclaimer before I do jump into it, there is a lot of different strats in the game and the strats are still evolving. But the strats I'm going to explain in this video are what I used for my current world record run that still hold as of the time of making this video. So if you're interested in watching my world record run, I will put a card in the top right now and the link in the description. Let's jump into it. So the official category name is actually New Game Random Seed Glitchless All Bosses. I will show the official rules on screen right now, but the general gist is you have to create a new character and a new world, and you have to kill all of the bosses as fast as possible without using glitches. It also has a random seed, and you're not allowed to use a seed viewer to view the map at all. Okay, so the runs start by creating a new character and a new world. Then the first thing we see is the intro. This intro can actually be skipped by logging out and logging back in again, but time doesn't officially start in this speedrun until the player moves the character. So skipping this intro doesn't actually save any time in the run, it just saves real time. And the reason I don't skip the intro is because the part of the map that you fly over with the Valkyrie does actually get discovered, so that when you land and you view the map, you do get the tiny added advantage of just having a little bit more of the map explored, which might help point you in the right direction later in the run. So we land, and as soon as we move, the timer starts. Speaking of time, this run officially starts when you first start moving your character, and it officially ends when you've defeated the final boss in the run. It doesn't matter what order you do the bosses in, but the time ends once you've killed all 5. Right away, we start collecting stone and wood. This is because stone and wood is very important, and we're going to use them later on to make a lot of campfires. We can use the torch to chop down saplings in the beginning and then move on to a stone axe. As soon as we start moving and start collecting rocks and sticks, we obviously check the Yagluth location, and then we slowly make our way over to Yagluth whilst looking for our next key items. At this point, we're obviously looking for deer to get trophies to spawn in the first boss, but we're also keeping an eye out for leather because we're going to need it later in the run. But our main focus right at the start is fire mats. If we see a deer, there's two things we're going to do. We're either going to place 2 campfires down in succession so that the deer walks over them both, which deals enough damage to kill it instantaneously, or depending on the situation, we're going to place down a cooking station and hope that this traps the deer so that we can kill it with melee or with a torch. Speaking of torches, to make sure we always have enough mats for torches, we chop down saplings because they have a very high drop rate of resin, and we obviously kill any greylings we see. Once we've got 2 trophies, we head straight to Yagluth, and by this point we want to be able to make as many campfires as possible and have a few torches. As Yagluth is spawning in, we place a series of campfires right under the sparkles where we know he's going to spawn, and because of the changes to fire after Hearth and Home, the more incoming fire damage an enemy gets, the higher the DPS of the fire tick, and that's why we use multiple fires. The DPS should be really good during this time, and if Yagluth strays away from our campfires and we can't place another campfire down in time, we keep his fire lit with the torch and it will still maintain the same DPS as long as the fire doesn't go out. Once we've defeated Yagluth, we pick up his trophy and his antlers, and we take the trophy to the spawn to activate Yagluth's ability. It's generally at this point that we check to see if we have enough mats to build a raft, because the raft is going to be our go-to method of traversing the ocean. Having enough wood and enough resin by this point is extremely likely, but this is why we keep an eye out for leather early on, which we usually get from boars. So as we do all of the above, we're always keeping an eye out for boars, and we kill every single boar we see. But once we have the Yagluth ability activated, we do just want to start looking for a black forest. So more on leather later. On the way to the black forest, we also hopefully swim by the coast of the Meadows and pick up 6 flint to make a flint axe, because we are going to need a lot of wood during this run, and having a slightly better axe does save a little bit of time. If we don't have 6 leather before we enter the black forest, we need to take note of that and remember to keep an eye out for leather later on. Whilst we're heading towards the black forest, we go towards any structures we see, and if we still don't have enough wood, we place down a workbench and we use the deconstruction feature to destroy the structure and get wood quickly. And ideally, we'd spot one of the core wood structures that allows us to get very quick core wood. Whilst looking for the black forest, we'll immediately check the map, and this is where the Valkyrie flyover comes in, because like I said, as you fly in with the Valkyrie, that area does get discovered, and hopefully you flew over a black forest so you already know where you're going next. That is why we don't skip the intro. As soon as we get to the black forest, we want to make sure we focus on getting as many blueberries as we can. We don't want to get too distracted, but if there are some in your path, it's worth collecting as many as you can. I won't go too in detail on food strats, but lots of the vegetables in the game now provide high stamina and don't require any cooking, which is pretty good time save. So we are mostly going to be going for any high stamina pickups that you don't need to cook, like blueberries or yellow mushrooms. Whilst in the Black Forest, our number one priority is finding the Elder location. The Elder rune spawns on big towers. It doesn't spawn at every single one. It mainly just spawns on the one with the roof and the grade wolves outside. I break down in my head the Black Forest structures to towers, mansions, and burials. And when I say towers, I'm always referring to the one that can have the Elder rune on it with the roof. And mansions are the ones that sort of have a bit of a porch and they can have the Elder rune inside. And burials are obviously burial chambers, which also can contain the Elder rune. One of the main ways I keep an eye out for these structures is by listening for crow sounds, because crows actually only spawn next to structures within the Black Forest. So if I can hear a crow, I know there's a structure close. This is also a good time to bring up beds, because there is a chance that by this point, you've moved very far away from the spawn. We use beds in the run all the time to reset our spawn point so that if we do die, we won't lose too much time by being sent all the way back to the middle, which basically kills the run. So we can do this by building a little structure to have our bed inside, or by using easy bed spawns, which is when you place a bed inside a pre-existing structure. This could be one of the towers, or this could be the entrance of a troll cave or a burial chamber. Basically anything that overhangs enough to create a roof. Speaking of troll caves, do you remember when I said we might need more leather? Troll caves are an amazing place to pick up some extra leather, and if we don't have the leather we're going to need for a boat by this point in the run, we're going to be checking every troll cave until we get enough leather. We go in the troll cave and run right to the back, and leather spawns in the treasure chests. You can also get bones, hide, and yellow mushrooms from troll caves as well. Burials. Inside burial chambers, our primary focus is obviously finding the Elder rune, but we also are going to want to collect cores. Ideally, we want to find 5 cores whilst we are looking for the Elder location, which is enough cores to make a smelter. Whilst exploring the burial chambers, I will also loot some of the chests, but arrows aren't super important to the run and we don't need that many, so I won't waste time by going out of my way for arrows, but if we happen to pass by a chest, I will check it for a couple of stacks of arrows. But once I've looted a little bit, I no longer loot chests. Speaking of loot, some of the most epic loot in the run actually comes from towers in the Black Forest. Whenever I encounter a tower, I place down a workbench and I deconstruct the chair outside for 1 fine wood. This is because bonfires have become extremely precious in this speedrun, and 5 fine wood is needed to make one. The bonfire is a clutch way of defeating certain enemies during the run, which we will explain later. We can also get fine wood from the mansions as well, which can also have tables inside. So if I don't yet have 5 fine wood, I will be making sure I deconstruct the chairs and tables in any of these structures when I do see them. However, there is a chance that we might find a shipwreck, and if we do, we destroy one of the boats for easy fine wood. During the Black Forest segment, we are also focusing on carrying as many fire mats and torch mats as possible. We are going to want a few torches, but we're going to want a load of fires. So we want as many stones and as much wood as possible. We're also obviously keeping an eye out for ancient seeds to summon the Elder. Once we have everything we need, we summon the Elder, and again, we place a load of campfires at his spawn location, because we basically use the exact same strat that we did for Yagluth. However, this time we make sure we have a bed placed down nearby so that if he does kill us, we can respawn and get back into the action. The reason we need more mats is because Elder simply has more health, and this strat does fly through wood, so you're going to always need a lot more wood for this bit. Once the Elder is defeated, we take the swamp key and we immediately start checking the coastlines for a close swamp, because it is possible to get a swamp very early. As we are checking for swamps, we also check if we yet have enough core wood to make a bonfire, which we also need 5 of. And if we don't have 5 core wood by now, it's a good idea to chop down a tree and get the core wood before we leave the Black Forest. Because we no longer need to carry around as many rocks as we did before, it's also now a good time to make sure we make an antler pick and mine 6 copper. If there is no swamp on the coast of the island we're on, we build a raft and start heading outwards. The further away you get from the middle, the more likely you are to find the later bosses. So generally, if we can't find a close swamp, we just start heading towards the edge of the map from here. So this is a good time to explain the raft. The reason we use a raft is because it basically costs no time to get the mats to build it. And on an ideal run, our bosses are all going to be in a line anyway, and we can actually traverse the map quite fast as long as we spend as little time on the ocean as possible. So really the strat when using the raft is just to briefly sail from island to island and do most of the traveling on foot. This is because of the length of time it takes to get all of the fine wood and to smelt all of the ores to make the nails to make the faster ships. It's simply not worth it when you can just reset for a better seed. Whilst we're on the ocean, we're keeping an eye out for our swamps, and there is a little bit of a technique to this, because although you can't see swamp trees from very far away, the bizarre land formation of a swamp looks like a series of tiny islands from a distance. So if we see something like that, we head straight towards it. However, even though we are focusing on the swamp at this point, if we do see a large mountain on the way, we definitely check it. Once we get to the swamp, if we find an abomination, we make sure we kite it towards some ancient trees and use the abomination to get 5 bark, which combined with the fine wood and the core wood and one of the cores now gives us the mats we need to use a bonfire. This is where the bonfire first comes in useful. We can then use the bonfire to defeat the abomination. If we place the fire at the abomination's feet and then light it, if we stand at the opposite side of the bonfire to the abomination, he will try and walk through it, but because he has a collision, it can't, so he just consistently gets set on fire and keeps taking more damage. We can also periodically repair the bonfire to keep it lit, but even if he does destroy it, all this does is cost us the 1 wood of lighting the fire. So even if he destroys it, we can just relight it and defeat the abomination very easy. So once we've defeated this abomination, we take the 5 roots that abominations drop. And if during our exploration of the swamps we end up with 2 abominations, then we use the 10 root to make a root mask. Root masks do require a level 2 workbench, so we will need to make sure we gather 10 flint at this point to make a chopping block to level up our workbench and then make the root mask. As soon as we see a crypt, we basically commit to the first crypt that we see. At the crypt, we place a bed in a safe location and make sure we set it as our spawn, and then we immediately start checking the crypt, mainly just searching for a Bonemass rune, but along the way, we do also loot chests and make sure we collect any withered bone from scrap piles or loot spots within the crypt. Chests could contain some arrows that are easy to get, and these arrows are actually worth collecting because poison arrows are some of the best arrows that you can get in the run. But rather than focusing on scrap piles to get iron, it's better to just keep checking for the rune and check every chest that you see, because huge stacks of iron actually can spawn in the chest and you can get enough iron that we need for the run instantaneously. This is also the point that we also make sure we start building a kiln and getting enough coal and start smelting the copper. Then once I have 20 iron, I start smelting that and we focus on our weapon of choice. In order to make our weapon of choice, we're going to need to place the forge, which is why we got the copper, and iron weapons also require a level 2 forge, and the easiest way to do that is to use a couple of the iron pieces that we smelted already to make a stone cutter, and on the stone cutter we instantly make the sharpening stone, and with the sharpening stone we place the grinding wheel upgrade. Now we can make the level 1 mace. The mace is basically the most cost-effective weapon for the speedrun because the only boss that we don't have a huge workaround for is actually Bonemass, and he's basically immune to everything except for silver and blunt, and the level 1 mace is really cheap to make and deals a lot of damage to Bonemass. Also, it's worth noting that at this point, if you don't have a root mask and we do have easy access to more iron, it's also worth making an iron helmet. This gives us just enough armor to survive a little bit longer during the Bonemass fight, and helmets don't reduce your movement speed. Next, we head off to Bonemass. Whilst doing this, we do want to head as direct as possible, except for if we see a mountain, because a key part of this speedrun is always knowing where you're going next. So if we see a mountain at this point, we will go and check it for a modder rune, but I'll explain mountains later. For the Bonemass fight, we want to make sure that we've got a bed nearby because we're definitely going to be dying because corpse run is a huge part of this fight, so we want to make sure the bed's somewhere safe. Then we simply just just fight Bonemass completely normally using the mace and the helmet. And if we die, we use the corpse run buff to counter the poison effects. The poison resistance of the root mask will allow us to survive a little bit longer, but if we don't have that, the extra armor value of the iron helmet does help a little bit as well. It's now time to move on to our next boss. Ideally, along the way, before I start exploring mountains, I want to have gone to a plains and looted as many cloudberries as possible, because cloudberries provide a lot of stamina very cheaply and very quickly. I'll now explain how we traverse mountains. So to explore a mountain, we first put a spawn close by at the base of a mountain. Then we can traverse it using a few different strategies. The absolute best one is actually to combine the Yagluth ability with Corpse Run. And it's actually for this reason that we try not to use Yagluth during the run, because we want to make sure we have it available whenever we want to check a mountain. To utilize this strategy, I drop all of my items on the ground, except for 3 food items that are high stamina and 1 random item that will allow us to drop a tombstone. Then, once we set the spawn, we do /die in the chat, and when we collect that tombstone, we instantly eat the food, and we've now got Corpse Run and an empty inventory, so we're not going to lose our items on the mountain, except for 1 item which will allow us to place a tombstone, which will help us later on if we do die. Now, as we start to run up the mountain, we activate our Yagluth ability, and the combination of the 2 things reduces our stamina usage by running so much that as long as we're running on the flat, we can actually restore stamina, which leaves us with tons of stamina for jumping. And because of the reduced stamina cost for jumping from Yagluth, by spamming spacebar, we can almost float up almost completely vertical parts of the mountain. Once Yagluth has run out, if we still need to explore by that point, we can just use corpse runs to survive the freezing cold, because they do counter that by restoring your health. But another key part of the speedrun, particularly in the mountain, is relogs. By pressing escape and logging out and logging back into the game, your stamina bar automatically gets refilled. And obviously, during the time when you logged out, you're not taking damage from the freezing cold. So another way we can explore mountains is by running as far as we can until we're out of stamina, then logging out and logging back in, and then further traversing the mountain. Relogs are also used at clutch times during the run, because they can remove poison debuffs and they can briefly de-aggro enemies. The reason we're exploring the mountain is because we want to find the towers that can contain the Modder Rune. The Modder Rune only spawns in the specific type of slim tower, so it won't spawn in the big castle structures filled with skeletons. It will only spawn in the smaller, taller ones. So all we're doing when we're traversing the mountain is keeping our eye out for those structures, and if we see one, we run straight towards it, and hopefully we can do that with Yagluth active. And if not, we place down a tombstone and we use a corpse run chain to get to that structure and check for a rune. Modder runes have a very high spawn rate in these structures, so it's likely that if you see the right kind of structure, you will find the modder location. Once we've found modder, we can then simply kill our character, and because we left all of our stuff at the bottom of the mountain, we can just head off in the right direction. As we're heading towards our next boss, it is also worth mentioning how we avoid serpents, because I'm sure that's a question you're probably wondering by this point. Whilst using the raft, we basically aim the character at the right direction using the map, and we face our character's camera basically just completely to the ground. This is because when a serpent spawns in, it will only aggro if it appears in your line of sight. This doesn't work to de-aggro, so we need to preemptively do this by just always sailing around looking down at the ground. Once we get to the Modder Mountain, we use the previously discussed strats to ascend the mountain. However, this time we do want to take all of our stuff up the mountain. Once we get to the Modder Altar, we use the antler pick to dig down under it and then in towards it, because the platform at the top does actually form a little bit of a roof, and this combined with the terrain gives us an invincible sheltered structure to place an easy bed spawn. So then we place a bed and we set that as our spawn. From here we use the previously discussed mountain traversal strats to scout and look for eggs. It's worth mentioning at this point that the reason that we only really try and keep an eye out for big mountains early in the run is because big mountains aren't just extremely likely to have structures on, but they're also extremely likely to contain modder, and because of that it's also likely we find enough eggs on the mountain that modder is on, because the bigger the mountain, the more eggs there will be. So in most runs, there's always 3 eggs on the mountain that modder is on. However, it is possible to get so unlucky that we don't have enough eggs on the modder mountain, and if so, that's a reset. So the way we kill modder is actually with the bonfire. We basically try and bait modder to land by jumping slipping in and out of the hole where we've stashed our bed. And once she does, we place down the bonfire right in front of her and light it. And then we just stand there, because the goal is to use her aggro to get her to stay on that bonfire for as long as possible, because the longer she stays, the more damage the bonfire does. This might seem a little bit scuffed, but it's actually huge time save, because it means that you don't have to craft any items to actually fight Modder. We don't have to do any kind of elaborate setup. Now, ideally, by the time you've defeated Modder, you already know where Yagluth is. The hope is at this point that we've passed through several planes, and whenever we've spotted a camp, we've checked it for totems, and that hopefully we either happen to walk in to the Yag location, or we already spotted a stone circle with Yag's rune on it. If we haven't found Yag but we killed all the other bosses, it's extremely likely the run is going to be a reset. However, we can play it out and start exploring planes and hope that we find him soon. But really, in my experience in this category, if you've had to spend a lot of time in the planes looking for Yag, it's probably not going to be a very good run. But Yag runes do spawn on these stone circles, so if we don't know where he is by this point, we head to the closest plains and start looking for those. Whilst exploring the plains, if we have excess leather, we will make a crude bow and use any of the arrows we have looted to kill death skeetos. And last but not least is Yagluth. The strat for Yagluth is to dig a hole in the ground and cover it with floor tiles, because Yag doesn't seem to aggro against floor tiles. Then, in this little trap, we want to make sure that we have a repair station for whatever weapon we're using. Once the structure is complete, we go and spawn Yag, and before he actually spawns in, we want to be back in the hole and completely sealed away before he appears. Yag does know where you are. He isn't aggroed because he hasn't technically seen you yet. So as long as you have a good setup and Yag didn't glitch, he will automatically walk towards you, and his belly will clip through the floor tiles, and you'll be able to safely start attacking him. And every time your weapon breaks, you use your repair station to repair and rinse and repeat until Yagluth is defeated. Alright guys, that's just about going to do it for this video. That was my brief explanation of Valheim new character speedruns. Again, if you would like to see any of this in more detail, then I recommend checking out one of my speedruns. As of the time of posting this video, I still have the world record, so I'll leave a link to that in the description. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and a nice positive comment for the YouTube algorithm, and subscribe for future content. I do actually stream live on this very YouTube channel and on Twitch as well, so I'll leave a link in the description if you're interested in that. If you'd like to support the content financially and help keep the dream alive, then you can do so on Patreon at patreon.com/nickrawcliffe, or by doing donations or being a YouTube member, so I'll leave a link in the description to all of that as well. You can join the Discord and follow me on social media at the links below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time, have a good one.